this schedule really shapes up for a playoff run with a 12-team playoff.
Areas that, you need to get from experience, which is just, hey, I need to make quicker decisions.
How do you define success for this team?
National championship.
What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here. It's another edition of our summer school series on Cover 3, where we fill you in everything you need to know about one team per episode. And today, it's Oregon State. Where would I turn? Of course, Beaver Blitz, Angie Machado. Welcome in.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So a year of a lot of turnover for Oregon State, obviously, with a lot of the teams leaving the former Pac-12. Trent Bray was in his first year. What's kind of the vibe now that some of the dust has settled there at Oregon State?
Yeah, it's been an interesting year. Trent Bray took he kind of stepped up. He was asked to go to Michigan State with Jonathan Smith to be the defensive coordinator. He stayed behind at his alma mater to take on that Oregon State job. His, first head coaching job. It comes from a coaching family. His dad, Craig, spent many years with Dennis Erickson, and he's grown up with it. Last year, he had Keith Hayward as his defensive coordinator. This year, Keith Hayward stepped away from defensive coordinator. He's now at Cal as a position coach again. But Trent really kind of shuffled things up now this offseason. So he actually is taking over the defensive coordinator duties alongside with his head coaching duties, but brought in a couple veteran coaches. Rob Akey, who spent time in Idaho and at Washington State, brought him in to kind of help on that back end, some of the back end stuff. Mark Kreiner came in, another veteran coach. So that defense now looks completely different. And it's fun to see Coach Bray now seem a little more confident, comfortable with that head coaching role. He looks back in his element. He's running around and that really active hands-on defensive coordinator. So he looks like he's having a lot of fun again with the defense.
I remember last year, chatting defense here. Eventually, I was like, they're kind of out of bullets at edge rusher. Like, unless my depth chart was off, like cross this guy off. This guy got, I think, probably pseudo kicked off the team, preseason, and I was like, who is going to rush the passer? Does Trent Bray have some kind of renewed confidence this year? Maybe they'll get after the passer a little better.
Yeah, last year was crazy. Last year, from the two deep that we started game one with, the two deep at defense, 17 guys were injured or didn't play several games. So that was rough. I mean, they actually brought over a walk-on tight end to come over and play outside linebacker at one point. And, Andy Alfieri is actually going to stay there. They do. They were able to actually get Nico Taylor back, who kind of started to hit his stride. He was a junior college kid, went from Kansas, from Hutchinson, but was one of those COVID kids. So he thought he was done. And then the ruling came out that if you were COVID, you could have another year of eligibility. So he is back, and he has such a good veteranness to that. And things were really clicking with him. So Nico Taylor's back. The defensive line looks a lot better. Now, that could be a little bit because the offensive line was a little thin this spring for Oregon State. But no, that is a big, big emphasis for Trent Bray this year, is getting to the passer. He'll say, we just didn't create enough disruption up front, which then also put pressure on the back end.
In looking at this defense, is there a guy or two you could identify and say, hey, if these guys play to their potential, or maybe they arrive a year earlier than they're expected to hit that ceiling, then it really makes the defense go to the next level?
Yeah, I think, you look at the defensive line. Thomas Collins is one that has to, kind of take that jump. He was a sophomore last year, true sophomore, really showed some flashes, but if he can take a step, Tavita Pomea, another interior defensive lineman, transferred in last year from Oregon, another guy that has the look. Like, you look at him and he passes the eyeball test, but he, again, looks just more comfortable in the system. But I really think it goes back then to the linebackers. Interior linebackers is really going to be key for Oregon State. They lost a couple guys this year, but then you have a true sophomore, Dexter Foster, who he grew by leaps and bounds this year. And then Rajon Davis transferred in from USC. He's a one-year guy. I really like those guys. And then there's a couple of young guys. Trey Glasper is a true freshman early enrollee cornerback, really turned heads this year. So there's some guys there that I think could be really strong pieces. And that we've just got to see it all kind of gel together here.
Is there a spot they have to stay super healthy because maybe the drop off from the starters to the backups is substantial?
D-line, I think, like you said, edge rushers, and then even the interior. I think the defensive line, the trenches in general, it's cliche, but games are won and lost in the trenches. Yeah. And we saw last year Oregon State struggled up front, both offensively and especially defensively with the injuries they had. I told you off air, Oregon State last year, of the 22 that started the season on the two deep, 17 of them suffered major injuries or illness that kept them out of at least 2 games last season. So Oregon State was super thin, have to stay healthy, but that defensive line, and edge rushers especially. They have depth, but it's a matter of will those guys all perform at the level needed.
I assume, given that Trent is still the head coach, that they're not running like drastically different scheme stuff, right?
No. And in fact, I think Keith Hayward kind of brought in, it was kind of Trent's defense, but Keith Hayward had his own kind of twist on things. It's back to being Trent's defense. And you see the energy around spring practice this year was I've covered this team. This was my 20th spring covering Oregon State football, and I have not seen the energy at spring. A lot of times spring is going through the motions, drills, and they went live a lot this spring, and the energy out there was crazy. And a lot of that's the energy that Trent Bray brings. Before last year, he was with the offense a bunch. He was, kind of splitting his time. He was with the defense the entire, for the entirety of spring ball this year for the most part. And, he's running, and it was a ball, 11 guys are running toward that ball on a loose ball. So lots of energy, and it will look, you say a swarming defense. That's what Trent Bray wants to run. And that's what you'll hopefully see this fall.
All right, we're going to hit a break. On the flip side, we're going to talk a little offense, maybe a little season expectations.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, y'all, welcome back into summer school. Talking Oregon State here with Beaver Blitz's Angie Machado. 20 spring practice you covered. That is amazing. 20 years there. Let's talk a little offense, Angie. So, new quarterback comes to town from Duke. Let me know about him.
Yeah, Malik Murphy made the transfer. This was a young man that Oregon State had identified, Ryan Gunderson, the offensive coordinator, last season in his first year. It didn't work out. He went to Duke, kind of pushed out at Duke, and he's handled it very well when he talks with the media about his situation at Duke. Originally signed with Texas, then went to Duke looking for that playing time. He led Duke to 9 wins this season, and then Duke goes in a different direction. So he's big, he's strong, he's physical. Oregon State goes from Giovanni McCoy was the starter last year, and he was about maybe 5'11", maybe 190 pounds, to now Malik Murphy's 6'5", 240, big, strong, has a huge arm. It took him, first half of spring ball, overthrew a lot of his targets, but he seemed to settle in. But then Oregon State also brings back Jabari Johnson, who was a one-time 4-star prospect out of Tacoma. He struggled he went to Missouri, transferred in as a redshirt freshman last year, got some time, and he's kind of the lightning to Malik Murphy's thunder. Malik Murphy's got a huge arm, big physical player. Jabari Johnson is fast. So Oregon State had some packages designed for him last season where he would come in and run the ball. I actually see Oregon State going, maybe not a full-time 2-system QB kind of thing, but there will definitely be packages for Jabari Johnson this fall.
I don't know if Trent's talked about this on the record or if you're able to share, but I mean, with Duke deciding to essentially go a different direction, there had to be some like the underlying things there, probably not like off field, probably just on field stuff they didn't love that maybe Duke won in spite of. Like, I mean, the kid made quite a few plays, like to his credit.
Yeah.
Are there things they think that they can kind of maybe like minimize some weaknesses and kind of embrace the strengths here with
yeah, I mean, I think when you looked at that Malik, I think there were some turnover issues that Duke maybe wanted to, look away. But like I said, 9 wins, great leader on the field. And to be honest, Malik's a West Coast kid. So I think from that aspect, it made sense for him to get closer to home. But by all accounts, from his own stating, he wasn't planning to leave. It wasn't like he's in the portal jumping every year, like we're starting to see. But I do think with Oregon State's system, they rely heavily on a run game. So you have Anthony Hankerson back, Salahuddin Allah, who was a true freshman that saw some flashes last season as well. But a decent wide receiver core coming back. Trent Walker had 1,000 yards last season. Taz Reddix, he's really flashing. A kid out of Florida who has showed some things last season too. And then Darius Clemens is a Portland kid, 4-star, originally signed with Michigan, played a year or 2 at Michigan, and now is back home in Portland and transferred to Oregon State. So that's kind of your core group. I do see Oregon State going tight end heavy. They picked up a tight end in Riley Williams out of Miami this offseason, another huge kid to go along with some of the guys they already had at tight end. So I see them utilizing the tight end. So you have a safety valve if need be, but Oregon State really wants to stretch the field this year. That was a struggle last season, and they think they can do that with Malik Murphy.
Offensive line, you mentioned it was a little bit thin for spring ball. Best case, what is this line relative to the competition Oregon State will play this year?
Yeah, and so, if you ask me one concern, what was my biggest concern going into the season, I would say offensive line. This is a team that lost 3 starters from a year ago. They lost their coach. Kyle Devan now is with the Chicago Bears. Luckily, the Beavs did not even have to blink because they brought back former O-line coach who was at Oregon in Mike Kavanaugh. So Mike Kavanaugh spent years with Oregon State, with Mike Riley. Most recently was down at University of Oregon and was able to make that trek 40 miles north to come to Corvallis again. I love the mentality with that. Mike Kavanaugh, he coaches hard and he loves them hard, but there's a lot of young faces there and some guys that need to get healthy from injuries last season. You get some of those guys back that had some, ACL, MCL injuries last season, get them back in the mix. They were very cautious this spring. I would say that last 2 weeks, at one point we had Oregon State had 10 offensive linemen sitting out. So some of that was cautiousness. Some of that was, getting healthy, but avoid some injuries, get healthy. But it's still the question mark because a lot of untested talent.
The schedule's so interesting to me. Are there 4 hardest opponents in the first 4 weeks of the year?
The first 4 games. Yeah. I mean, it's a gauntlet, Texas Tech and Oregon and Cal opening weekend with Cal. So that is going to be a tough run. If Oregon State can somehow go 2-2 in that, I think the rest of the season sets up pretty nicely for them.
Especially if the weakness is offensive line. I mean, Houston has a couple guys who can kind of get after the passer, but I don't think App State or Wake certainly don't profile as such. Lafayette, that's probably the first time I've actually seen them play Oregon State, right?
Never played them before, and that was kind of a last minute filler. Pac-12 has been ever since it, 10 teams left. It's been in a kind of a scratching together schedule mode. Next season, it should, 2026 should be a little easier. Still looking for that 9th football opponent to join the conference. But next, 2026, it gets a little easier. But trying to cobble together schedules, a 2-year schedule, has been tough. So Lafayette is people kind of do a double take on that one.
How would you define success this year for Oregon State?
You talk to coaches and they they still have in their mind, this is team that we could, run the table. That's hard. That's going to be hard to do. I think success is staying healthy. This team could see some success if they stay healthy. And then, you talk about players making that jump and the next step and their growth and development. I think that comes to play with coaches too. Oregon State has, Ryan Gunderson is a first-time not first time. He was an offensive coordinator with San Jose State, but really calling plays here. Actually, he wasn't. Sorry, this is his first-time play calling duties at Oregon State. So some inexperience there with coaches. I think Trent Bray is more comfortable. So I think the comfort level with Gunderson and Bray, some of these first-time coaches at their position, is really going to help. But staying healthy, and then if Oregon State can sometime, like you said, if their first 4 games is a gauntlet, I think in my mind, if you can win 2 of those, I think that could set up for a pretty good season. Last year, I know they had high hopes to win 8 or 9, and that didn't happen. So always a bowl game. I mean, they always want a bowl game, but I think that's doable this year.
Awesome. Angie, really appreciate the time. Oregon State fans, I'm telling you, Beaver Blitz is like the spot to go. I usually pull from a lot of different resources to put these together. All my questions are from Beaver Blitz. I'm like, hey, so you guys got to check
We've been around a long time. This is what age and experience get you.
Y'all crush it over there. It's impressive.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Angie.